Hi everyone, from me, Brent Graham of Goodforthegame.co.za, and welcome to this Rugby World Cup 2027 predictions video. I can tell you the date is the 11th of December 2023. We're about 43 days since South Africa won the Rugby World Cup, and a man who was there that day, and I actually saw he popped up on SuperSport. It's Harry Jones. Harry, great to have you on the show, mate. First of all, Rugby World Cup 2003 fresh in the mind. I guess you haven't stopped smiling.
Nah, it's really amazing. Sometimes I think it was just yesterday, and other times I think it was 2 or 3 months ago. So I love that picture you sent me of that moment because I will always remember that moment of everyone reacting in their own special way. Some people were hugging, crying, shouting. I think it was also a mixture of relief because you're hanging on and hanging on, and it seemed like the All Blacks were going to do that All Black thing where they come from behind and do something. So no. It's brilliant. I do love the idea of an extremely premature prediction. I love that idea. Let's just go 4 years from now. Yeah, blow it out.
Exactly. And I've been seeing your tweets. And of course, you know me, I look at the betting and I go, oh, the bookie's got this right. So we're going to run through that now. So first of all, anyone who does enjoy their rugby, subscribe to the Good for the Game YouTube channel. Hit the like button as well. It helps a lot. Harry and I are going to be held to these predictions in 4 years' time. And maybe, Harry, what we'll do is an annual update or something, to say, right, okay, this is where we looking at this stage. Eddie Jones is doing wonders with Japan. Looks like they're gonna win the Rugby World Cup. And just to mention as well, this is only for if you watch the show in the first couple of days. We've got a book written by Mike Greenaway, The Fireside Springbok. I can tell you it's a superb book. There is a review on the YouTube channel as well of this book, but some absolutely great stories. It'll have to be a South African winner, but all you've got to do is make some sort of prediction for the World Cup 2027 below in the comments. I will be doing a lucky draw on Friday. I use one of the sort of apps that do the YouTube draws, and I'll notify you if you're a winner, and we'll get that book signed by the author sent to you. So that will be a great one to get. And then, Harry, we're going to now start talking about the actual 2027 tournament. And the reason I asked you on the show was I picked up after the tournament, you did a lot of sort of research. You were looking at, how experienced were the teams, how well they did and that sort of stuff. So before we get into the individual teams for 2027, take us through this one and just explain what you're thinking here.
Yeah, so, World Cups are actually very small sample size, so they're difficult to extrapolate anything from. But even before the World Cup that we just went through, I used a doctrine of mine, which is that you have levels, and those levels translate into the highest level, which is World Cup knockout matches. And so it's a different tournament. The pools are like a different tournament from the knockouts, and the knockouts in a World Cup are meaningfully different than European champions, Super Rugby finals. They're even a cut above that. And so what I was able to do was relatively easy pick out sort of the 8 teams that would make it into the quarterfinals before they happened. Now, once you get in there, it's 1 point, who knows? It could be anything. But just the idea that it was not surprising, for example, that Wales or England or even Fiji would have a good shot at it. And it wasn't that surprising that the French would struggle to go all the way because of a lack of World Cup knockout wins before. It kind of took shape in this, and I had all the players' names in, of course, but then I just started saying, what if I put it down and I say teams that have prior World Cup knockout wins, and I structure it that way and depict it in sort of a color. And you see All Blacks and Springboks jump out because they, in their teams, like in the actual things that matter, which is forward packs, they were able to put down teams that had been there, done that. You saw that with England, and surprisingly for me, Argentina. And then I started thinking, it's not so much about the coaches being there for 3 cycles. You could do it with 1. It's that you need to have a player group that's been there for 2 cycles or more. And once you get to the 3 cycle and they're still healthy, you've got a hell of a team. So I looked at the French and I said, it's interesting because we all thought, okay, they were really young last time. This is their time, it's at home. But even with that home advantage, which they definitely had and definitely benefited from, they suffered from a prior World Cup knockout win deficit. They even, to some extent, still have that problem, but they, at this point, have people that have played in Australia in 2027. You're looking at a team that's going to have really critical game managing leaders for whom it's their 3rd World Cup. So that spells trouble for the rest of us.
Right, well, let's go on to the next slide. So what I've done, Harry, I've just taken them in betting order. I'm using the odds of Boyle Sports, who recently launched in South Africa. We've got, now, I'm not for one professing that you go and bet on the World Cup 4 years out. In fact, I would do it only if I saw exceptional value and if I had money to burn, because, I mean, I don't want to tie up funds for 4 years. But it's always very interesting to see where the bookmakers come up. So let's look at New Zealand now. And here's your slide on them. I can tell you they are currently the ruling favourites at 13-5 or 26-10. What does your slide here tell us about New Zealand going into the next World Cup?
Yeah, so what I did actually is I took, a 4 World Cup cycle and I plotted it out. And you can remember 2015, one of the best teams of all time. And then really only a couple of people make it from that all the way over to 2023. But when you look at 23-27 or 19-23-27, guys like Bowden Barrett stick out. You have some continuity there with other players as well. But when you can see that, in the back line, for example, on the cycle of 23-27, there is significant game management experience there. And depending on how Cam Roygaard comes through, and depending on what happens with the heir to Mwanga, or if Mwanga can have a contract that makes him come back, you have a back line that's trouble for the rest of the world. And then New Zealand playing right across the channel from Australia. The problem for the All Blacks in this cycle is they didn't develop what I'll call a core of tight forwards and even loosies that really have the ability to close out these tough games. It looks like they're going to be underpowered going into 2027. And I think what we've learned about it is also, Jacques Nienaber, Don Human, they built, a squadron of forwards. A lot of the props in the Springboks talk about how their hardest games were scrumming against each other in practice. So I think the problem for the All Blacks is not that they don't have some good players, they have great players, but don't have the depth of it, which will factor into injury, loss of form. I just feel like they're a little bit light. So going into 27, I never really think it's a good idea to bet against the All Blacks in any particular game. But on the idea that they have their best chance, no, I don't think. 15, obviously, great. And 19 and 23, I think they had decent shots at the title. I think 27 is going to be one of their off years, no matter who's coaching.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, obviously they got Razor Robertson coaching, so I think that's where the bookies are giving them respect. Yep. World Cup in Australia, some people arguing it's almost like a home one for New Zealand. But for me, when I look at New Zealand, what they've lost coming out of this World Cup, I'm 100% in agreement with you, Harry. For me, they've lost an incredible core, and it's not a core that you can easily replace. And
yes, yeah,
like you say, I mean, if it was South Africa, I'd be a little, and South Africa losing a couple of players as well. But like I said, I just feel our production line amongst the forwards. You look at this Hanekom guy now who's come out of the Bulls. We'd never heard of him 2 months ago. That type of thing. So I'm actually reckon that New Zealand, certainly I wouldn't make them favourites as the bookies have made. So I definitely wouldn't think there's any value in backing them now. And Harry, I'm actually going, look, obviously we're making predictions here a long way. I'm thinking they might battle in the next World Cup, and I'm predicting a quarterfinal exit here. And I'm going to take a bit of stick from some of my New Zealand mates, but predicting them to go out in the quarters. And you were saying potentially semi-finalists.
I think they still make the semis because there's still enough people there that can calmly take over a game. They're not afraid to win or lose. They're not, they're just not jittery guys. Even in the final we just watched, I mean, they were right there. Make one kick and they're there. So I do think they're tough to kick out in the quarters, but I think the semis maybe one too far for them, given what Ireland and the French and the Boks have, I think.
Right. Well, let's move on now to second in the betting. It's the Boks. They, of course, are going for a hat-trick. They're just over 3-1 here at 63-20 at Boyle Sports. We have put a link down in the description box. If you are in South Africa and you're new to betting, you want to open an account, click that link and you can go through and get your welcome bonus there. Right. Tell us about the South African side, because I see green all over the page here.
Yeah. So it was actually one of the most amazing things ever pulled off by a coaching group to have belief in players like, say, Dwayne Vermeulen, right? So most teams would have given up on the guy. About a year ago, they'd say, nah, we already got this Visa guy, so let's just, swap out new for old, the shiny new things. But actually the Bok idea was always, I think, to have this battle-hardened spine battalion idea. And then you stick in people in positions like, Kurtley Arendse. You can play with that. But as far as what I'll call just the actual core, like we're going to put on a field that we can do this, it was amazing to see the continuity. If you look at my my chart there, you look at 2015, 19, 23, that is an amazing sight to have that much green. These are players who were the first choice player in a knockout match, who won a knockout match. And it's unbelievable. If you actually play that out, there's no other team that had won that many knockout matches in a World Cup in the field for 2023. It wasn't even close, actually. So now you come on to this next phase. I think Rossi has tipped his hat and said, we're going to have to work on, players 4 through 7, because we're not actually sure that Etzebeth, that De Jager, that Mostert can make it with RG's injury rates. Sneeman might also, you don't know. And I think that's exactly right. He knows something there, which is maybe we do, maybe we don't. So I put that all in red and say that's up for grabs. But besides that, you still look at unbelievably continuity team there. I mean, you can just look at that and immediately say, as long as they do have the health at lock, there's infinite numbers, like you say, of loose forwards. You could just stick, right now, you could stick 10 guys in that slot and say, give them 3 years or 2 or 3 years of playing with a box, they'll be fine. What is different is lock, because lock is it's not a normal animal. Like very difficult to have people of the stature of Lewitt, of Ibn, of Mostert just come along at 2 meters plus. It's just an unbelievable combination. So I think that's the one question mark, and it's why I would say that it's an uphill for the Boks to three-peat, and it's why I would say they make the final. But I think right now, unless I know more, unless I see more, I would say they're not the favorites to three-peat.
Yeah, and very interesting that you and I went for the same winner and the same finalists, and we never spoke about it before. And I just asked you to message, and I'd already prepared the slide, and I couldn't believe it when you said France from the Boks, because that's exactly what I did. But I touched on that Honeycomb a second ago. I mean, when that oak has just burst onto the scene, and there's probably another 2 or 3 like them, and that's the advantage you've got at the Boks. And I mean, I never really thought. I mean, I do think of experience in that, but when I saw the slide, it was like it sort of hit home that, there's a tremendous amount of experience there. But like you say, Rusty would probably be saying it's a bit, of those guys in red, maybe 2 of them make it into the squad. But he knows he's got to find other players to come in. Yeah. But you are going to have your Etzebeth, who would be almost like your Vermeulen of this year, who's going to be that experienced head there. 2 of them, but there's no way, and you probably don't want to take all of these guys, even if they're reasonably fit, because at the end of the day, I don't know. You don't want too many players in their late 30s sort of playing for you in a World Cup.
Yeah, it's about right. We look at the average age of the Boks this time. They were in the top of the ladder, but they were still it was still a nice number. Like it was in the 20s, I think, 29. And you don't want to be Australia, right? Coming in at 24, average 25. That's ridiculous. But I do think they were very careful to not hang too much on any young guy's shoulders, which is why I think the Libbok Pollard thing in the end worked out just right. Mani took them kind of as far as it would go, and then at some point it was time to bring in the ice guy. Similar, I think, when you're throwing into a line out at 79 minutes. Unbelievable story for the Boks this time, but you wouldn't really want to put all your money on the idea of a makeshift hooker coming in and or line out caller. So I think you're right. There's some guys there that will definitely be not too old. Etzebeth's not going to be too old. It's a question of the mileage on the body. 30 games a season, this kind of load they put on these players. It'd be unbelievable for me, like Pieter-Steph du Toit, we just saw one of the best performances in the rugby history. But do you think that body, can necessarily make it to 2027 Australia? I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, there's obviously the clubs are going to be still demanding them. I mean, Pieter-Steph is obviously playing in Japan. And good news for South Africans. Looks like we might get a few of those Japanese league games on TV. I just want to make one further comment there. I mean, Rassie Erasmus did say when he won the first World Cup in 2019, that's a bonus. He was building the squad for 2023. And I guess now you'd say, yes, some rebuilding has to be done there. But we're both predicting a final appearance there for the Boks. Let's go on to France now. 2027, 26-5. That's just over 5-1 at Boyle Sports. And both of us have got the French listed here as winners, Harry.
Yeah, so this is to me, it was very surprising when I did this research. I hadn't gone back to 2015 and really analyzed that team. I didn't really look at 2019 properly either. There were actually quite a few people playing, like Intermac. There was Aldrit was playing already in 2019. I didn't know that. I thought they just came on, recently. So you have this core now where you have, and some of these guys played together in high school together, like Aldrit and Dupont. They've been playing since they were 14, 15 together. When you look at that middle stripe of blue and realize when people will be 30 years old, 30 years old, 34 years old, 31, 30, that's just prime time, right? Olivant, Gelanche, Flamand. That's perfect. That's like Bach age in 2022, 23. You also go back to the back line and you see game managers there, and you can see that they have choices now, which is what the Bucks had too. You had two guys you can play. You have not just one. And then you look at the 2027 projection I had with the ages and the continuity. You're looking at a team that's very, very seasoned. They know how to win. The number of caps they'll have will be 1,000, not 800. They can put a team on the field with 1,000 caps, and that wins World Cup knockouts.
And I'll throw something else into the mix there, looking at it from a up-and-coming youngster point of view. You're going to have this incredible core that France will have. And you've also got sort of French teams that are coming off winning 2000 under-19 World Cups and that sort of stuff as well. So you've got an incredible bunch. But you are, and I didn't realize it either until I saw your first slide, was that, France didn't carry that much experience in terms of knockout rugby into this year's tournament. And maybe that cost them at the end of the day against South Africa. Because in my mind, for me, France, South Africa deserved to win. You know what it is. If you're winning at the end of the game, you deserve to win. But in terms of some of the just best, let's call it the best 30 minutes or 40 minutes of rugby, for me, France were the best team there. So with that experience, a bit more youth coming through, I think they're going to be very hard to beat in Australia.
Yeah, no one. So they had no one who had won a World Cup knockout match. They lost the quarterfinal against Wales with that elbow, the Jacob Paper elbow thing.
The red. Yes.
And they were driving for a try on the try line. They would have won that without that. So, it's really interesting how the French shape, and also so they have resentment, they have anger, they have that bad memory, they have like what Andre Pollard talked about was 2015. That semifinal loss against the All Blacks was eating at his soul, and I think. You look at Dupont, who's always been kind of a nice, fun guy, and he came out bitter. He was mad, and that will drive you. That will get you up in the morning, and you run a few extra miles up the mountain.
Right. Let's move on to the next team in the betting. It's Ireland. Also lose a number of key players. They're 26-5, so same price as France in the betting at the moment. And Harry and I both suggested semi-finals, which would be Ireland's best performance in a World Cup. Although I did think, Harry, they were desperately unlucky to run into the All Blacks and lose that quarterfinal.
They almost did. So this is so strange. I've done the purple line in the middle of my picture here to depict Johnny Sexton, and pointed out that, in a way, it's the end of an era, but they almost hung on too long. Had they groomed a guy like Frawley or Ross Byrne or Harry Byrne or somebody to be like the Lubbock Pollard connection or the ability to switch, between playmakers. Intermac went down, but the French didn't miss a beat. I think in a way they were so reliant on Sexton that right when they needed him most, in the final series against All Blacks, he was done. He literally could not run anymore. And so I think in a way, the reason why I still rate Ireland very highly is the entire rest of the team is there, basically. Really it is. And then McCarthy looks like a real stud at lock anyway, coming in. Is now you've got these candidates, Frawley, the two Burns, Crowley, that look really good. So if they can settle on one of those guys earlier in the process this time and give them, but have two or three of them, gunning for it, I could see that maybe very strange way Ireland could be better without Sexton. That makes no sense, I know, because he's the best player that Ireland ever had, but in a way, I think it's better for the team dynamic is not to rely on too much on one player.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said there, because when you said it actually probably counted against them without realizing it at the time. But the fact that they were banking so much, all the talk was, will Sexton be ready? Will Sexton be ready? And in the end, he played a hell of a lot of rugby for a guy of his age as well. And yes, in those final minutes against New Zealand, he wasn't the only one, but my word, he was absolutely out on his feet and understandably so. So yeah, still lots to be optimistic about there for Irish fans. Let's go on to the next team, and that is Australia. Now, Australia, the home team. Harry, I mean, I probably can't think of another team that's 4 years away from a World Cup. I guess we'll be able to say this about the USA in 2031, but that's in such dire straits, so close to hosting a World Cup. They probably hit rock bottom now. And the question is there enough time for them to grow up and to grow the team and contend?
It's such a sad story. On the other hand, I keep thinking Australia has a lot of the things that every other team would want. So you have a Lions series coming up, which gives you the ability to really put people under the fire and see what they're made of. You are the host for a World Cup, so you're sort of guaranteed, an extra sort of 2 or 3 points in every match. You have, the home support, you have the comfort, but also you have such good players. It's just that it's such a mess right now. When I did this one, I sort of splashed a lot of red there because it's unknown. We don't even know what the pack looks like. You have Angus Bell, I think is about the only one that you can say that's for sure, and Ballatini maybe. But beyond that, it's a guessing game because of the age, because of the style, because you don't know who the coach is going to be. The back line, you have some like unbelievable talents, but like Marky Mark's gone now probably for a while. Corabetti was retired and unretired. The whole thing's in flux, and you don't know who the number 10 is. Every other team that we're talking about here, who the playmakers are, who they'll be if they're healthy. But with Australia, you don't know anything. So I have a hard time seeing that they can do much besides get into the quarterfinals, which is what they should do every time. I mean, the Wallabies always get out of the pool. They'll get out of the pool, I think. But I don't see them doing anything because they don't know how to win a close knockout game. And I don't see anything changing unless, they discover a mystery tribe of rugby players somewhere in Upper Queensland.
No, it's a good point, and I must admit, I was sort of torn. I went for them in the semi-finals. Basically, I've always had a soft spot for Australian rugby for some reason. Even this year, I actually traded out of it, but I initially backed them to win until I saw what a state they were in. So I'm always, and I guess I'm still, if I want to say, in love with those sort of Il Jones teams and, the teams of the late 90s, Gregan, Larkham, and those guys. And the reality is, I guess, they're not quite there. So if I had to redo this, I'd probably rethink me saying semi-finals and probably put the All Blacks in there now that I've sort of studied your charts there. But yeah, Australia got lots to work on over the next few years. But as you say, they do have that Lions series at least. Now let's go to England, who showed that they can play knockout rugby. Of all the games, I really thought the Boks were going to lose against England in that Rugby World Cup semi-final. They came into the tournament, no one gave them a chance, and in the end, they ended up making the last four. What do you think of their chances in 2027?
Yeah, so I think they went back to an English way of playing. It was really clear. They had the perfect draw. They were always going to make a quarterfinals in this World Cup. Going to the next World Cup, I still think they always make the quarterfinals as well. I think the one thing that I'm not sure about is what they do with their playmaker. Like, how are they going to? They've been held back in a way for like 3 or 4 years now about this Ford, Farrell, Smith thing, and we're still stuck with it, right? So, Farrell isn't really a 12 at the world test level when everything's on the line, because the guys who really are that, the Akis, the Dalendes, the Karevi, even Jordy Barrett coming along leaps and bounds. They're just totally different looking athletes. So if you look at Farrell as a 10 and he's saying he's not going to play for England now, maybe England finally gets to play with, because he's not going to play test rugby right now, maybe they finally get to do a real departure and say, can someone lead this team that's more like a Johnny Wilkinson type, which is what I think England needs. I don't think they need someone running around when no one knows where they're going to go. I think it's more of the Ford type. That's my theory. So yeah, I think they've got it, but they have to solve that, and then they have a couple of holes of people that you don't know if they're going to get there. Like Courtney Laws is one of the best players that ever played Test rugby for anyone, and I don't know if he makes it to Australia. I think maybe with Tuolagi it's the same thing. And then in the front row, I don't know if Jamie George, Marla Cole's there. I don't think so. So you're looking at a new breed. So all that given, I don't see England going to the semis this time for the first time in a while.
Yeah, and I think that fly half battle or dilemma that you've got. It's so true. I was watching the Racing Harlequins game yesterday, and when Marcus Smith is playing in an open game like that, he's just simply untouchable. He's got that. I always said to my son, he's got that ability to put people into space that you cannot coach. You've just got to have that sense for where the space is. But the problem is, in a World Cup knockout game, there is no space. You can look all you want, you aren't going to find it. So I agree with you there. I think if anyone, Ford would probably be the guy they would probably need to back, or a Ford like perhaps up and comer, but he would have to come up pretty soon in the next couple of years. Right, let's move on then. I'm calling this slide Rugby World Cup bolters. I just brought the other betting out, so I'm not going to go into detail of all of the teams, but Harry, Argentina 35-1, Scotland 35-1, Wales 35-1, Fiji 35-1. So the bookie's not separating those, and then you go out to bigger prices, Samoa and Japan at 155. Is there anyone there that you can see surprising in the World Cup? And I mean, I guess you'd argue if Argentina make the semis, it's not that big a surprise because they've done it before. Is there anyone who you think, well, if you had to say, gee, that's quite a big price for one of those teams? Anybody you can see really being a big factor in the next World Cup that people are probably not considering?
Well, given that I think, like my doctrine suggests, that it takes a long time to build a team that does well in a knockout, I think the handful that you mentioned, that is the handful that you can choose from. So then I would almost knock them out one by one. I think Wales is going to struggle to do well in 2027. I think they overperformed in 2023, but I don't see that happening again. I think there's just fundamental infrastructure type stuff that's going down there or being stagnant. Second, I think Scotland wasted their generational players. I think they had kind of bad leadership there with Stuart Hogg for a while, which we now know more was worse than we thought it was, actually, from some of the stories that come out. And I just think they never really meshed well with their generational stars. So I'd still look at Argentina, which is very bizarre, but I think the Americas is on the way up. I think the quality that you saw from Chile and then from Uruguay, there are things brewing in North America as well that, and it may seem like it's not with some of the teams folding, but I think that is going to help Argentina. I also think they're just particularly well suited for tournament play, knockout play. They seem to have the right personality to do it. I don't know exactly why all the reasons are, but I would still say the Pumas are going to be something to reckon with. They are very comfortable in Australia. They have a lot of connections with Australia. A lot of them have lived there and played there and done a lot of things there. So I think that's also a plus. And they get to play every year a couple of times in Australia or New Zealand. So that's probably where I'd go. The Celts, I think, on the way down. The Americas on the way up. Japan is my big question mark. I don't know what to do with them. Sometimes I think that league is going to make them so good, and then sometimes I think that the league almost has the effect of the English Premiership in soccer, where you think it's doing well because the league is doing well, but it's not really that many English players. So I wonder about Japan being so flooded with outsiders that it's not actually allowing them to develop leaders, but that's just something I don't know.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how Eddie Jones goes now that he's back at the helm there as well. But one thing for sure, I mean, every year the World Cup has got more and more competitive, harder to. I mean, this year was the first year, and it was also largely because of the draw. But I just couldn't make any confident calls at the start, and I think that gap between the top teams is just going to keep on shrinking. And I think come 2027, there's going to be probably one or two teams that maybe have improved a little bit more than what we think. So it's going to be very, very interesting. But Harry, it's certainly been good to nail our predictions down early in the year. And just a reminder to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the channel. And before I say cheers to Harry, yes, if you're watching this in the first couple of days, we'll close this off on the 15th. I'll do the lucky draw. So just let us know any prediction for 2027, and if you're South African, we'll get you this book, The Fireside Springbok. I can tell you it is an absolutely great read. Harry, from our side, absolutely good talking to you. Look forward to having you on the handicap show a few times next year to talk a little bit of betting as well. And what have you got planned over the festive season?
Oh man, I've got some good trips lined up. I think I'm going to be in Vegas at some point. I'm going to be in Madeira Islands of Portugal. I'm going to try to do some hiking, get healthy, and flush all this alcohol out of my system, man.
Well, I'm leaving in a couple of days' time on holidays. I'll be flashing some alcohol into the system. Just a reminder, if you do enjoy And if you do enjoy your rugby, sign up for our free betting newsletter that goes out generally once a week. Actually, on quite a good run at the moment, but absolutely no guarantees in that regard. Harry Jones, it's been a pleasure. I know you've got some work to do. Thanks very much for joining me. And yeah, well, let's revisit this in a year's time and see how our predictions are looking.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching.
Good stuff.